Goals. What are goals for? Or is the process more important than the goals? Is it important to have a language goals when it comes to learning a new language? Hi, I'm James and I can speak Spanish and Italian. I help people get to a conversational level in another language. Today I'm going to talk about a very common topic that's asked quite a lot to me. How do you define language goals and how do you reach it in the first place? And are goals even useful? Well, there's a lot of different perspectives on this. From one side, it's great to have a language goal because it gives you the motivation and the push to try and get there. If you have a goal and say, I want to be at X level of this language by this moment in time, then you're more inclined to go out of your way and to really push and be motivated at it. Whereas if you haven't got a goal, it can be a bit difficult because as soon as something else comes up or something, it's easier for other things to have higher priorities if you don't have language goals, if they're not solid. But then, on the other hand, the question is, there's a lot of talk about once you reach a goal, then is there any point of continuing? Like, what happens after that? Do you just move the goalposts and set new goals? Well, realistically, language learning, at least from my perspective and psychological research, suggests that it's more about the process than the goals in particular. So you'll notice that your current habits and your daily routines, they all add up, and over time, they accumulate, and what happens is that what you see now, the person you see today, is an accumulation of your habits in the past. So if you've been going to the gym quite often, you might see your physique or the way you look to be reflective of that, basically. And it's the same with language learning. If you are good at integrating it into your daily routine and you have a process for it, that can quite often be more effective than a goal. A lot of gym goers, they go to the gym, they set themselves goals for motivation, but I think most importantly, or I know most importantly, it's about commitment to it and doing it over a long period of time that's sustainable. So it's not in terms of, oh, it's January, let's work out, let's sign up to a gym now. The question is, why didn't you sign up to the gym in December or November or October? Why did you have to wait until January for that? And it might have been because you've got a goal to get fit by the summer. And that's completely understandable, that's acceptable, and if it works for you, perfect. But for a lot of people, that isn't enough because the motivation is what gets you going to the gym in the same sense as languages. The motivation is what gets you started. So quite often what happens with a lot of people is they go on holiday in July, they go to Spain or Italy or a foreign country, and they're really inspired by different people speaking languages, and they're sort of at the table and they're having dinner, and I think they're inspired by a situation that they might see or notice there. It might not be fully conscious to everybody as to why you want to learn it. You might just have a feeling of, I'd really want to learn Spanish, that would be quite cool. You might have seen something on TV or something, but that motivation is good. It's really good to ride that wave of motivation, but that won't get you to your language goals. If you want to be at a conversational level at a different language, it takes more than motivation. It takes a daily and weekly commitment of certain things, certain activities you have to do every day. That doesn't mean you have to sit down and study an hour of grammar every single day to get good at Spanish. It just means that you have to surround yourself with a language that fits around your lifestyle so it's sustainable. So if something isn't sustainable, like you need to make sure that you've got your pen and paper out to write down all the conjugations of every verb and everything, then if you don't enjoy that, you'll do that once, and then when the time comes around to do it again, something will distract you. I can promise you'll be distracted because something else with a higher priority will take over. So it does matter as well as in terms of your priorities, but if you can do little bits here and there, if you use Duolingo or Memrise or any language app, that's perfect as a contribution towards the overall effort. Language apps will not get you fluent. That's factual because you need practice in various different areas of the language in order to get fluent or conversational at least. Language apps help you with vocabulary. They help you very early on when you don't know how to say hello or goodbye in a language or count 1 to 10. Duolingo is perfect for that, and so is Memrise in different topics. But when it comes to actual speaking, you have to anticipate, or you have to you're in a conversation, so you don't know what the other person's going to say. So that is conversational skills basically. And for most people, they don't care about reading or writing in a different language. It helps definitely to see the word or to be able to write in it, but realistically they want to feel good and show off to themselves and maybe to friends and family in a nice way that they have these conversational skills and they're out and about and they can use them. And with that being said, that's what you need to focus on. So if your goal is to have a conversation, then pay more attention to that. You need conversational practice. And this brings me on to my next point of you need to be able to speak with native speakers and practice with them. So there's a lot of apps like Tandem and Hello Talk and iTalk as well, where you can have a chat with a native speaker. But I've noticed a lot of it is text chat. So how are you, where are you from, but you're typing to them and you can see their responses. And that's good, but there's two problems behind that. One problem is you're not replicating this type of interaction you would have in real life. In a conversation, you're not typing, you're not reading the person, thinking about it, writing back, and then quite often on your keyboard as well, if you're on Android or iPhone, you'll have an auto suggestion thing if you've got different languages. And if you're speaking Spanish, it might suggest the correct spelling of it. And then they can see, it doesn't require your pronunciation because they can see where the accents are. So that takes that skill out of it. So you're not required to come up with a conversational skill if you're talking with people that way. You can, however, after a few conversations, have video calls with them and meet up with them or something, or do a video call, and that is great. However, I've discovered, as many of you may have discovered, it's hard to keep that consistent, especially when money isn't involved. If someone says, oh yeah, let's have a chat on Wednesday at 6 p.m, something crops up and you can't do that. Either you've got kids or something, or your friends are saying, oh, we're doing something, and you say, oh no, sorry, can we postpone it till next week or something, or can we do it tomorrow? And unless you and your language partner have exactly the same pattern, then it's hard to organise like that because it has to be regular enough. And also, if that's the case, you've got a language exchange, which means that half of the conversation would be in your native language, so for me it would be English, then half would be in the other language. So you'd have to be quite strict as to when you stop talking in one language and you start another. But if you can get that to work for you, then perfect, that's amazing. I haven't had that working for me because it's just hard to find those people who are at that level of commitment and can commit on a regular basis on the calendar. It's nobody's fault, it's just not everyone has a regular lifestyle and priorities can get in the way, understandably. The alternative to that is what I do, and I'm not affiliated with any language schools or any platforms. However, there are some platforms where you can pay per hour session or something, and all you need for this point, so I'm undervaluing a lot of teachers on platforms now, but what I'm saying is what you can do is filter for the cheapest hourly rate or someone who's quite new to teaching. It's not a teacher that you're particularly interested in if you're looking to just practice and you know what you want to do. A teacher is good for when you don't even know where to start and you're very basic. That's perfect then. But in terms of practice, all you need to do, this is a substitute for finding a language partner on an app. But the only difference is you're paying for their schedule, their time. Because you've paid them money, they're not going to change their money. And the platform, your lesson, it's you that has to show up now. They'll be there regardless because you're paying for them. So that's one thing you can do. And that's one level of commitment where it requires some financial commitment from you. So it depends on your financial situation. Not everybody can afford this. If you can't afford it, then I recommend you should really try and find a language partner who is as dedicated as you are in terms of having a regular day set up, or regular day of the week, a practice session basically. Anyway, back to the original point. How useful are goals when it comes to language learning? I would say it's 10% or 20% goal, the rest is process. I'd say 80% of it is process, and the process that you have on a regular basis, because this ties in with motivation versus discipline. Discipline gets you to a conversational level or fluent in a different language. Without discipline, you give up after about 4 to 6 weeks. That's how long it takes motivation to die down. And when motivation dies down, you stop learning that language. So goals are out of the window because goals are really powerful when your motivation is there. However, what you want is for you to forget about the fact you're trying to get to a certain level. You just continue, you're ploughing on, and then before you know it, you can have a conversation in a different language. You didn't aim for that, it just so happened that time passed and you were doing what you needed to do on a daily basis and you got to it. So my advice, if anyone's saying, okay, how do you integrate language learning into your lifestyle? That is for a different video, but I'll leave this here. I'll say there's a lot of different, it depends what form of communication your goal is aiming for. For the sake of this conversation, it would be for conversational level of the language. So if you're aiming to be able to speak and be understood by native speakers, albeit with with a few grammar mistakes here and there, then your best bet is to surround yourself with listening to the language and try and get exposure to speaking it as well. So this is where you need either a language partner, or you can pay a cheap rate for online practice sessions or lessons, half an hour half an hour a few times per week is perfect. Quite often our attention span, understandably, is 20 to 25 minutes at a time. After that point, we start losing the efficiency of what we remember and how fast we can process things. We can still do things because you get an hour lesson, but that two things. One, it might hit your attention span. You might not have a long enough attention span. As I'm not saying that you're stupid, I'm just saying as humans we have a limited attention span at once, and 20 to 25 minutes hits the sweet spot here. And secondly, if you have an hour session and you can't be bothered doing it, you're going to be more likely to cancel it and you're going to not look forward to it. So if it's half an hour, it's good. A few of these per week is perfect. Minimum 2, so you get an hour per week of conversational practice. Then, alongside that, on a daily basis, if you can, if you drive or you commute to work or something, or you go to the gym, try and have, on the music app, I use Spotify, I listen to a podcast that's completely Italian. So it's not, I've heard of these other podcasts where they speak a bit of English and they explain the Italian and the meaning behind it, but that doesn't get your ears fully adapted to the sound of the language that you want to listen to. So for me, I listen to podcasts that are a bit slower than quick speech, but I can understand more of them basically. But don't expect yourself to understand everything from the start. This is just to get your ears and mind used to the sound of the language, because that makes it easy for your brain to identify the language and understand what native speakers are saying later on. And all this exposure on top of the practice sessions gets your brain used to hearing things. So yeah, you get your listening exposure from the podcasts and also from speaking with native speakers. And then the speaking practice is from the practice sessions. So 2 lots of half an hour per week I'd recommend. Any more than that is perfect. Obviously the more the merrier, but keep it to that as a minimum, basically. There's a lot of different things you can use to integrate language learning into your lifestyle, but these are just a few of them. But in terms of goals, it depends what you're learning it for. If you want to learn it to send an email to a pen friend, then reading and writing is perfect for you. If you want to use it on a practical basis, maybe you're going on holiday or you're traveling and you want to be able to speak or have conversations in a language, don't worry too much about reading or writing. Focus more on the sound and the feeling of the language in your mouth, the pronunciation, things like that. But don't worry too much about getting perfection, again, because pronunciation, you can mispronounce something in your native language and people still understand. And as long as there's context and the words surrounding what you're trying to say make sense, people can tell that you might mean bus instead of bass or something, or cap or cup, or grass and grass. There are a few examples in English where you can still understand what they're saying, even though the pronunciation isn't what you expect it to be. And that can be the same in different languages. So yeah, that's my advice for today. Goals versus progress. I'd recommend 90% goals versus the sort of process you have on a weekly or monthly basis. I'd recommend 80% of it should be you focusing on how to integrate language learning into your daily lifestyle and weekly lifestyle, and then the goal should be the icing on top, depending on what method of communication you want to use for language. And also don't expect motivation. Goals are great for increasing motivation, but that only lasts a certain amount of time. After that, discipline takes over.